Good morning, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, I am audible. So, this is our annual webinar that we do at the start of the interview preparation season, and we'll talk about what the season entails, how you should prepare for it, and what are the typical pitfalls. This is obviously open to anyone and everyone, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel as well. So, why the interviews are so important, make or break, some of the important questions, and then typical mistakes that IMGs tend to make. And of you who don't know us, our team helps you in almost every phase of the USMLE other than the exams. So whether it is the rotations, whether it is obviously the ERAS application, personal statement, program outreach, which programs to apply to rotations, interview preparation, of course, that is why we are here today, post-interview communication, and of course SOAP, and eventually the final match. Before we get started in terms of the interview preparation, how we go about it, there are obviously mock interviews. There are classes, there is one-on-one advisory, we help you in rank order list. Program outreach, we do it in a closed Telegram group, and we also have program-specific guidance and interview preparation. And we are now, of course, enrolling. For those of you who may be interested, you can reach out. Now let's move on to some of the typical mistakes that the IMGs tend to make, starting with either inflating their CVs, PAs, and padding these things up, and those kind of behavior. And let's go to George. George, I know you wanted to talk about the mistakes in content and how the content is presented and articulated.
Thank you, Pawan. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yep.
All right. So this is a very common issue that we have. We have a good profile, we submit our CV, we get the interview, and we're at the interview, and there's no change that you can make on your CV once you certify it, and there you're stuck if you have a mistake on your CV, and if someone notices it, most likely they will. So I'd like to go step by step on the sections of the CV where most mistakes are made. So starting from after the personal details, the addresses, etc., then comes the membership section. A lot of people don't understand what the membership section means. Membership is not having an account in the AMA or FREEDA website. You don't write member AMA. Okay, so those things are picked up because these things are very common now. Like just because you have an account in the ACP website doesn't mean you're an ACP member. Things like that. If you don't have any, of course, you just need to say that you don't have it. You don't need to write these things, just for the sake of it, because there are people who are asked on this, because just as Dr. Garg said, there are faculty who will be prepared on your CV, and then there will be other interviewers who aren't. So if this is an interviewer who has already read your CV and found this to be interesting, he's a member of the ACP, let me ask him what he's been doing about this, something about the role, because I was asked about a certain experience, and unless you're able to speak about it for a whole 90 seconds, then, and if you're flustered, then they can easily catch it. Then that sets a whole a tone for your interview. Your integrity may be questioned later on, So you don't want to bring that from such a small point. It might just be that you don't want to leave that space empty, but if you have nothing, just leave it empty, okay? And the next thing is in the experiences. So when we go to volunteer experiences, work experience or research experiences, there might be experiences, all those experiences are true, you've done all those experiences, but during your interview, if you're not able to talk about it, if they ask you, tell me about your elective, tell me about this particular elective that you did in New York, if you're not able to talk about it, it leads them to question, were you even active during this elective, what were you doing, Were you very passive? So having a very passive attitude during an elective or rotation, that reflects very poorly on you. And you might not have been passive, but if you're not prepared on that question, or if you're not prepared on telling what exactly was your role, that can put you in a bad light. So the same thing goes with volunteer experience. There are many people. I recently reviewed a CV where they had like many just fabricated volunteer experiences, things that you've never heard of. And then when you ask them, they say it's online or things like that. So whatever it is, if they doubt one, they're likely to doubt many other things in your CV, and then you might easily be put on the do not rank list. And you don't want that to happen. You've scored an interview with a lot of hard work, and you don't want to lose that precious interview. So whatever you type or whatever you write on your ERAS CV has to be accurate. So the recent ERAS, so ERAS has a code for integrity, and they've mentioned that 5% of things mentioned in the ERAS CV are fraudulent. So you have to be careful. There are program directors and other residents, faculty who look for these things, so be very careful. Another very funny thing that I saw recently was someone asking if we can say that we don't need a visa, when in fact you need to, and then assuming that at the end of the interview season, if they like you, they will give you a visa. Absolutely not. So visa is a hard filter and probably one of the first filters that ever goes through in a program. If you need a visa, don't assume that they're going to give you a visa if the program definitely says that they're not going to give a visa. So this is, I would say, borderline stupid to assume that a program will give you a visa when they've explicitly said that they won't. But I've seen this. I never expected someone would actually do it, but I feel like I have to say this. The next thing would be in the publications and presentation section. So fraudulent publications, very common, very, very common. If it's not even, if your manuscript is in publication, is in preparation, it's not supposed to be in the publication section. If it's at least been submitted, then you may put it in the other than published section, but not if it's in preparation, in review, literature review. No, none of these things. These things should be discussed in your research experience, if you have such an experience. Otherwise, they're not supposed to be in the publication section, because they're going to ask you about it, or they might even Google it up, and if they don't see it, then everything beyond that or everything before that can get difficult and uneasy for everyone. So that's so fraudulent publication citations, plagiarism of personal statements. A lot of people do that. They feel like when we take a few sentences from multiple personal statements, it's not counted as plagiarism. But yes, if they see familiar statements, they have read so many personal statements over the years, these program directors, sometimes they give these personal statements to the chief residents to read. Chief residents have read many more, and if they feel that something is fishy, then it might turn out bad for you, and they might even ask you, or they might not even they might just put you in the do not rank list. So you don't want to bring these situations towards yourself. And another thing, as Dr. Garg had said, a lot of people will ask you about your red flags. So the deal about red flags is you have them. There is no changing your red flag. If your YOG is large, or if you have an attempt, or if you have lower than average scores, all these are red flags, and there's nothing you can do to change it. So being defensive when they ask you about it is not the way to go. That is a very bad thing during the interviews. If you have a red flag, admit it, say what you did to recover from it, or what you did to compensate for it, and then move on. That's it. So it's as simple as that. Everyone appreciate honesty and integrity. No one likes being defensive. You need to own up to your mistakes, own up to your deficiencies. Everyone makes mistakes. So it's not about being defensive or saying, I was sick the previous day, that's what this thing happened. It might have been true, but that's not the way to do it. And another question, I think this is one of the very common questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years, as Dr. Garg said? A lot of people tend to tailor these answers according to the interviewer. So if the interviewer asks, if the interviewer is a nephrologist and you say that, oh, I want to be a nephrologist in 5 years, then you don't really want to be, that's bad. And then you go and tell the next interviewer, oh, you know, I want to be a hematologist, just like you. Things like that. So these are very simple things. Even though if you use the common sense, you understand that these people would discuss, and if they hear, you know, multiple answers from different people, and it just sounds like you have no integrity, you know. So whatever you want to do during your interview, just be honest. You know, you have a fellowship interest, say yes, you know, I'm thinking of this, but I'm open to other ideas. Or I don't have a fellowship interest, I just want to be a hospitalist. Anything you want, just be passionate about why you're there in that program. You have an interview at a certain program, and you're excited about that program. Show that excitement. They appreciate the raw excitement that you have. It should not be a theatrical experience. Even though we are rehearsing for it, the passion or the excitement for that program should be on your face, and that would trump most other like doubts in their mind. Yeah, I think that's pretty much covered all the section that I need to say.
Thank you, George. Continuing with the mistakes, let's move on to Chintav. I think you want to talk about the body language or non-serious kind of behavior that we tend to show in the interviews.
Right. So yeah, as we move forward, I just would want to go back to what George said about the visa and lying about that. It actually happened in my program where I am, where an applicant actually lied saying that they had a green card, and when the match results came out, she did not have a green card, and she ended up losing her spot. So again, as he said, never assume the program is not going to sponsor visas if they say no. So lying is not an option. But yeah, since you brought it up, there's real life that people have done it, and I have seen it. So just wanted to bring that up to you also. Never lie about the visa status. All right, so anyways, we're going to talk something about the common body language and communication errors that we do during the interviews. And I'm particularly very big about the body language when it comes to the interviews. We all come from a country that, you know, we get entrance into the medical school based on our scores. There's not a big thing about the interview, and that's why we're not used to it. So that's where we're not used to how to sit in the interview or how to communicate in the interview. Those are some of the common mistakes that everyone has to learn from. And I won't lie if I said that I was very good when I came to this country for the first time. So let's focus on most of the important things that you would actually do on an interview day. One of the things that absolutely is very must is you need to understand that when you're in an interview day, there are people looking at you. You won't even notice, but there are people around, you know, in the form of residents, in the form of coordinators, or even in the form of just a med tech. It's just everyone has their opinion in who they want to take, because these are the people you're going to work with for 3 years. So try to interact with everyone. Show them the respect. That's one of the other things that we tend to make mistakes is like, oh, she's just the program coordinator. Oh, okay, well, she's just the tech, you know, I don't need to talk to her. And we tend to go towards people whose opinion is going to matter, but we got to understand that everyone's opinion matters, not just the program director, faculty, or the resident. It's everyone who's there on the interview day. So that's one of the common mistakes I've seen, particularly from IMGs, is they tend to go towards the program directors and residents and try to impress them as much as they can and try to, you know, strike a conversation. But then the real part is that you also got to go to the program coordinator and everyone else who's around you. So that's one common mistake we make. I had the luxury of interviewing like an American predominant programs, like American graduates as well as IMG graduates. One of the things that I have very well noticed is the interactions between the IMGs at a residency program. I know everyone is super competitive. It's a cutthroat competition in the United States to get into residency, but that also shows a lot about you as a person, and that's also being monitored when you don't interact with your peers at a program, like people just sitting next to you. The most common question an IMG would ask is like, hey, how many interviews do you have? Or hey, how many, what are your scores? Those are absolutely the worst questions you really want to ask sitting on an interview day, because let me tell you, people are noticing right there. And you don't really want to do that. You know, that's none of your business. You guys are at the interview, talk about different stuff, ask him where he's from, you know, do that. Because when I went to a program that was predominantly American graduates interviewing, you won't even notice that these guys never have known each other. It's so obvious that they get along, they talk about different stuff, they talk about sports, they talk about weather, they talk about city, but the least thing they do is talk about their sports and how many interviews they have. So again, a very important takeaway point, don't matter how good you are, just be very respectful to everyone you see on an interview day, because everyone has a big opinion to form. Also, don't be like a person who's just going to sit on the side on an interview day and not try to communicate with anyone, because again, I've seen people who are just sitting there taking down notes, and another worst question to ask is like, hey, you just had an interview with the program director, what is he asking in there? And it's just a reflex thing that the IMGs do all the time. It's nothing against you or me. I did it. I never did it, but I learned it. Like, you don't do this, because we do this back home, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, hey, what did they ask you in the room there? So you want to get prepared, and I understand that, but it doesn't work here that way. It's all about spontaneous answers. You can be prepared on every answers you can, but at the end of the day, when you go in there with that guy for 20 minutes, there's going to be a lot of questions that you are not going to be prepared for. So having said that, when you're actually with someone in the room and sitting there, make sure you guys practice about how you sit, the posture, how you look into the, you know, your interviewer's eyes. The last thing you want to do is just look down all the time and not having the eye contact, because that, you know, you can be nervous. That's another thing. Everyone is nervous on the interview day because it's a make or break thing for what you have worked so hard. But then there's also something called as, you know, being just not confident in your abilities, and that's what shows when your body language is not right. And it's pretty obvious when you're sitting in the chair, you know, talking to the program director or the interviewee. Just make sure you have a correct posture, and you know, you're wearing the right kind of clothes. I've seen people come in with weird colors on the suits, like, you know, like dark blue. I've seen someone wear pink. No, just, you know, you can be, we don't have white skin to pull those kind of clothes off, so let's just think basically to like black or blue color, because that's the kind of thing that American graduates can actually pull off, and we look really funny. So it's nothing like I'm just trying to, you know, not make fun of us, but it's just that our skin is not made for that kind of clothes, and it's very obvious when people try to pull it off, it just doesn't work. So stay what, you know, dress properly. The other thing I always tell people when we do mock interviews is like, you know, we can do 5 mock interviews with you, but that's just 15 minutes. But again, you want to look yourself in the front of in the front of the mirror and see how you do actually when someone asks you a question, because that I can give you 10 comments when we're doing mock interviews or anything like that, but again, at the end of the day, it's you who's going to stand in front of the mirror and try to find out what are you, you know, lacking, how are you speaking, what are your eye contacts and everything. The other thing is I'm gonna kind of try to keep it really short. The last thing that I absolutely hated when people told me, but it's actually such an important thing when you go to the interview, is your handshakes, right? You don't want to come across as a person who has a very weak handshake. There's something called as a good handshake, and then there's something called as squeezing the hand. It's a very fine margin, but you guys got to learn that it can be like a female, you know, like females can get away with it, that's fine, but as a male, you really want to shake, you know, the handshake with them in a way that proves that, all right, you know, so there's certain ways, so you also want to do that. You don't want to squeeze their hand, but it should be a firm handshake to make sure that you come across as a person who's confident in your abilities and you're really excited to be there. So yeah, having said that, you know, we're kind of running short on time, so I'll stop here. But yeah, we'll open up for questions at the end.
Thank you, Chinta. This is very eye-opening, I hope, for a lot of our listeners.